Hi, this is Jim from SlickCyberSystems. I'm joined with Chris and Miles Walker from Kaseya, phenomenal vendor of ours. And Miles is a wealth of knowledge. And say hi, Miles. So, anywho, today's topic is
Hey guys, great to be here.
what are the top cybersecurity threats facing SMBs now, and how should they prepare for 2026 and beyond? So, I guess let's start out with some basics, right? You had
Sure.
just mentioned before that you had a customer of yours, an MSP, that couldn't convince somebody. I'm leading right into this because this is this is hot off the press.
Yeah.
Without
Yeah.
sharing any names, would you mind sharing the
Story.
situation, and
Yeah.
then we can kind of
Yeah.
into it.
This was, and I gotta say, this is the kind of thing that I hear, I'd say often, not every day, but I was on a call an hour ago. The partner was late getting on and he apologized. He said, I'm putting out some fires. I'm like, what fires? He said one of his clients had just been attacked. It was a BEC attack, so a business email compromise. And the cyber criminals had got into the system and they were fishing for info and they were fishing for money. And he did some quick digging and he found out there was a compromised email or password. And that compromised password was from the CEO who refused to get multi-factor authentication while simultaneously making sure everyone in the organization has it, but he wouldn't do it because he was annoyed to have to go on his phone and do the facial recognition and put in the number.
Nice, nice.
And I just thought this is so fitting because I said, you better go talk to him after this and tell him how you guys were this close to having that business being taken down.
Yep.
And he was going to be the weakest link. And often I talk in my presentations when I'm traveling around the world about, a company can have a super good cyber hygiene, but if they have that one weak link, whether it's a new employee that was onboarded, whether it was a disgruntled employee that just doesn't care anymore, whether it's a family member who, an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, a wife, a girlfriend who has their own email but doesn't do cybersecurity training or improve their cyber hygiene. That could be the weakest link that takes down the company. And I
Absolutely.
said to him, the other big thing about that attack was that imagine if they actually had paid a ransom, the insurance company would have gone and done a forensic audit and realized
Yeah.
that one person wasn't doing MFA and they would have not been able to make a claim.
Right. Not a single bit. So so how do you think if what if that customer would have had a SOC, managed SOC in there, and an EDR and all the stacks that we sell, that you guys
Yeah.
offer, and that we walk through.
Yeah. So, I mean, I always say cybersecurity is a layered approach, like an onion. You can have a SOC, you can have EDR, you could have dark web tools that are scanning, your environment and making sure that those credentials aren't on the dark web. But all, I won't say all, 90 to 93% of cyber attacks have a human element. So you can try and put all these products in place, but if the people who you're protecting aren't helping with their own protection, you could be in trouble.
Weakest
And
links. Yep.
I
Yeah,
I always say that you can have all the bells and whistles, but if you have people that don't care and don't realize that they can be, the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, you're going to be in trouble.
yep. And we've done a lot of videos internally, and I have talked about that time and time and time and time again. And you can't stress enough that the training is just it's so crucial. That people get training, and it's not rocket science. It's in my opinion, common sense stuff, but coming from an IT guy, right? I mean, but
Yeah, yeah.
from a
And
business side, it still makes sense. I mean, geez, hey, this room is burning on fire. At least the left hand side of it is. Should I walk on the left hand side or the right hand side? Well, how about just don't go into the room?
Yeah.
You
Sure.
know, all right. So that would be the common sense of it all. Don't walk into the bloody room because it's going to
I,
spread to the right.
I think though that this all comes from a top-down approach though, because I mean, when you're talking to IT people, they get it. I'll give you an example, which we're not going to be naming any names, but my uncle, who I love very much, he works and sells carpets, like high-end carpets for boats, for banks, for businesses. And this past year, they got taken down by a cyber attack. And the owner's daughter is the one who looks after all the cyber hygiene. And guess why she got anointed the expert? Because she did one class in computer science at a local community college. So you know what? She's now got the crown of cyber expert, and they got taken down. They were down for 2.5 weeks. And
Ooh.
because their systems were so archaic, they were locked out, but they didn't pay the ransom. And I reached out to some friends and I connected them up, and they lost a couple weeks of productivity, and they go, "Oh, well, whatever. We lost a couple weeks of productivity." But, I did some quick math based on their sales. They probably lost 100 grand in sales because of it. And they still have not improved their cyber hygiene. And it just shows that, you know, you can lead a horse to water, but not make him drink.
Mm.
They had an attack, they were shut down, and they still haven't taken the steps to rectify that, which I find that to be absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, I mean that from a CEO standpoint, I look at that and I go that's beyond unacceptable. I mean, you really should be putting a lot more work into your company if you care, and especially
Yeah.
at the tune of roughly 100K. I mean, man, that
Yeah.
that
And
that's a lot of pennies.
I think the thing is that lost opportunities, like I mean, they didn't lose $100,000. They just had those opportunities lost because if you work it out on an average, weekly basis, they're selling 10 grand worth of carpets a week or whatever the number was. But because it was lost opportunities, they didn't see that as lost money, right?
Gotcha.
But
Yep.
I find that with people like that, doing cybersecurity training, doing courses, it's so vital because they've never had that in their business because the bosses is not saying we have to do that. And I always, bring it back to a sports analogy because even if you can believe this, on my 44-year-old knees, I still play basketball once a week. And I always say, I did not become good at shooting free throws without practicing. And the normal everyday person, especially who has no background in IT, won't become good at recognizing a phishing email, or an attempted attack unless they see it. And they have to
Yep.
see it not just once a year. They have to be seeing this every month. And I always say it's far better to fail with a company, like your company, running that solution for them, running that test, than to fail with an actual cyber criminal who's trying to attack.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you are a big proponent, I'm assuming, of um, pen testing and the like.
Of course, of course. I mean, I do a lot of talks. I mean, I know we've talked about this in the past, but I'm usually out of country every other week. I am based in Canada, but I'm in the US every other week. And I just recently, I'll call myself the opening act for the FBI. So I was at an event, beautiful sunny Orange County, California, and I did a talk at a Morton Steakhouse, which if I can get flown down to America to eat steak, I will do that any day of the year. And I was the first speaker, and I met the cybersecurity professional from the FBI. We had some great banter. We were talking back and forth, and I jokingly said, "I'm your opening act." And I took some notes from what he said, and this is going to blow your mind. So there are now 50 billion, that's with a B, devices that are connected to the internet in 2025.
Wow.
And if we looked back at 2005, it was something in the hundreds of millions. And so I never thought of it like by that approach, which is 50 billion devices connected means way more chances and attempts for a cyber criminal to a hack. Like they can hack into things like Alexa. They can hack into
Mhm.
a Bluetooth activated air conditioner. I heard that one recently. A Wi-Fi enabled fish tank. That's another one I heard. So these cyber criminals are getting smart and innovative.
My favorite, and it was a topic of one of the videos that we did,
Yep.
the dishwasher. A
Oh,
freaking dishwasher. What in the heck? A dishwasher. Why do you need
yeah.
to have that connected? That I don't know. That's just nuts.
And I
Whatever.
think I'm going to go back to 2009, so back into the olden days of cyber attacks. When I was moving back from Toronto to Vancouver, and I was traveling with a good friend who was, I'll call him an IT specialist. What was that his actual job? No, but he'd gone to school for computer science. He had kind of dabbled in the hacking world, and we were in a hotel in I can't remember if it was Montana or South Dakota. So we're doing the road trip back. I was moving home and he said he'd come and do the trip with me. And we got onto the Wi-Fi and he's like, don't get on a public Wi-Fi in a hotel. I'm like, why? And he said, watch this. And I kid you not, he got onto the public Wi-Fi and he started seeing what other people in the different rooms were downloading on their computer. And
Yeah.
I had never seen anything like this before. And he said, look, here is, and he downloaded a woman's resume that was a couple rooms beside us. And he said, this is what she just downloaded on her computer. And I couldn't believe it was that easy to do.
Hmm.
And that really gave me a wake up call.
Yeah. It's crazy. All right. So a hypothetical here, a company that
Sure.
is not, I'll say, not properly poised. What are the first things that they should do from a budgeting standpoint? What should they be prepping for first? For 20, let's just say now to the budget for 26, right? 2026.
I mean, what we often say is your first dollar should go towards backup. And I think that's something that, I'll use my uncle's company as an example. They were backing up stuff, and guess how they were backing it up, guys?
Okay.
A
USB
little
drive.
USB drive, a 1 terabyte USB drive. And they lost all of their designs because everything's custom made, right? I mean, you're going to put a carpet in a boat, you don't have a stock standard size of boat. You have to go
Right.
in, measure it. There's obviously a liner between the carpet and the plastic. And so every one of those things is custom made. So, for example, if that carpet, has wear and tear in 3 years, they call up and say, hey, we want another carpet. Just use the exact same design as before, but make the gray darker. They don't have that because they were attacked. So I go back to
Wow.
backup, backup, backup. That should be the first dollar spent.
Cool. All right. And then post backup, what would be, let's just say they already have a proper solution in place for that. What would be the next?
So I'm in love with security awareness training. If I didn't have a fiance, I might marry security awareness training because that is something that is so engulfed and encompassing everything we do in our world. So people think of it as, oh yeah, we have to watch some silly little videos for 5 minutes. But um, I love this story from our CISO. So our CISO is a guy named Jason Manar. He was a Kentucky State Trooper. Then he moved into the FBI Cyber Crimes Division, and then he joined us a couple years ago. And he said, Miles, if you were at a company and you left the door open, and someone came in and stole all the computers, what would happen to you? And I said, well, I'd probably get in trouble. I wouldn't get fired because mistakes happen. He's like, correct. He's like, what happens if a month later you left the door open again and someone came in and stole all the new computers they had to buy? And I said, well, I don't know if I get fired, but I probably get in a lot of trouble. And he said, correct. And he said, what happens if a month later you did that again? And I'm like, I would for sure get fired. They're not going to allow someone who has, gross malfeasance to work for their company.
Yeah.
And companies now have to start thinking about, cyber attacks like that. If you have someone who's constantly allowing, a cyber criminal into the door because they're being careless or reckless, they
Yeah.
can't work for you. And
Right.
I have so many small businesses say to me, well, our guys won't do the training. And I said, you know what helps? And I asked our CISO this. He said, paying their salary really helps with doing that. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, Miles, if I told you you had to do a cybersecurity awareness training this week or you're not going to get paid, would you do it? And my answer was, of course, 100%. And businesses now need to be a little tougher and say, guys, you have to do this unless you're on vacation or away. You have to do this by the end of this week, or we're not going to be paying you. And the second that fear of not getting paid comes in, they're gonna do that pretty quickly. Or you
Yeah,
say Monday morning, you spend that first hour or 30 minutes going over these videos, and this is something you have to do if you want to continue on working for us. And after they've done it a few weeks in a row or a few months in a row, it becomes commonplace.
right. And yeah, it's that is so critical. And I wish, even a lot of our customers, the larger ones have it and they do it. But the smaller ones are the ones that scare me even more because they should have it and they don't. And just lack of willingness to make their people, as we said before, top down approach, right? This has to be forced from ownership.
Yeah, they almost seem like they're often like too busy doing the work to realize that that that's part of the process.
It's part of the work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Awesome.
and people often think, well, I'm too busy. Okay. I'm not gonna lie, I do not like multi-factor authentication. It's annoying, but it took me, 80 straight days of having to do this to realize that what was it? I think my dad said, he goes, if you don't like something and you can't change it, change how you think about it. And so that's what I did. I changed how I thought about it. That's the difference. This annoying thing called MFA is the difference between me having a job with this company and not, and me also knowing I'm doing my part to protecting the business from an attack. So when I started thinking of it like that, it wasn't as annoying as it was at the start.
Yep.
And, having those talks with people is something that's so key. And I know, when I do my chats, when I'm out, speaking to partners, speaking to local businesses, at the end of the day, everyone has to be accountable now. And this is the way our world is. You know what? I remember, I mean, I know both of you do. Remember the days when we didn't have email on our phones and we could just
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
we'd be out for a drive and we're like, oh, it's not my issue because I'm driving for 2 hours,
Yeah.
right? And within, I think that was around 2009, within about 3 or 4 years, everyone had email on their phones and that became mandatory. And MFA is like that. It was something that we didn't really like or we found it to be an annoyance. Now we have to do. And that's where cybersecurity is at. People are going, oh, it's annoying, but it's something that we have to do
Evil but
because
necessary.
evil. Oh, I like that line. I'm stealing that.
That's the second time I've used this in a video. So it is evil
Evil
but
but
necessary.
necessary. I love it. I
Yep.
love it.
Yep. Cool. Yeah, Chris, do you have any questions for Miles?
Um, no, I think we talked about so far. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, you covered so much so quickly that I didn't even get a chance to go through my syllabus. So I'm glad, I'm happy for that. You saved me time and money and effort.
Well, I do tend to speak a little fast. That's the one thing all my bosses say. They're like, bring it down, don't have so much sugar, no more Red Bull, relax a little. But
well,
I
we're
think,
from the Northeast too. It's the same. So as you
yeah,
talk
there you
fast just
go.
to get it
Oh
out.
yeah,
And I think
absolutely.
one of the big things as well, we do a report every year, and we talk to several thousand businesses and what they're feeling and what they're scared of moving forward. And I always find the report pretty insightful. And this past year, the number one concern for small businesses when we're talking about cybersecurity
Yeah.
is phishing. So this is something that if we're going to say it's a gateway drug, phishing is a gateway drug to bigger things.
Yep.
Yep.
Uh, People don't realize that phishing is often the way that ransomware, gets deployed. Phishing is also the way that cyber criminals will get information for a bigger attack.
Yep.
And
Right.
I find that phishing is something that a lot of people don't understand. If you ask, the average Joe walking down the street, what's the difference between, phishing and spear phishing? They would probably not be able to answer that. And hopefully in 5 years, the average Joe will know spear phishing is a targeted attack, while
Mhm.
phishing is just like it sounds, throwing on a net,
Broad.
seeing what you get back, a broad attack. And
Yeah.
these are all things that are going to come into play in our world. I know, speaking to Americans almost every day, South Dakota was the first state in America to make cybersecurity training mandatory in high school. And I thought that was so interesting that for some reason they decided this is something all kids need to learn.
Yeah.
And I think that's the first domino. And hopefully every state, every province, every county will realize that this is something that is not going away. The genie will not be back in the bottle. And
Ever.
we have to learn to live with this kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Awesome. Miles Walker, Kaseya, thank you so much for being with us today, man. It was very insightful. I don't know what else to say.
I look forward to,
I'm
I look forward
speechless.
to our next talk.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I mean,
let's do another one.
we should totally do another one. We could dive into some other stuff. We could dive into small business attacks with ransomware. We could dive into AI. I love as well taking some of our studies and taking the numbers and breaking them down and what they actually mean. Because, people might read these studies and go, oh, that's interesting, but what it actually means. Like, I'll leave you with one last note, because I know we got to get out of here soon, but we saw poor user practices and gullibility this past year jump from 15% to 45%. So does that mean we're getting stupider? And the answer is no. It means cyber criminals are getting
Getting better.
smarter.
Yeah.
Yep.
But when I go out and talk to the public about this, they go, maybe we are getting stupider, and we're not. It's just that cyber criminals are getting smarter. They're figuring out new and innovative ways to attack us.
Yeah.
Yep. Locke keeps an honest person honest. There you go.
There we go. There we go.
Miles, thank you very much. We're going to
Thanks,
wrap
Miles.
up, and we will chat with you in the next video.
Appreciate it. Can't wait for the next
Have a
one.
great
Let's do it.
Thank
Thanks,
you. Have a
Miles.
good one.
Bye.
Do.
Bye-bye.
If you find this content helpful, please like the video, subscribe, and share with your friends and your colleagues. Thank you.